I do want to switch gears to politics a little bit, especially as you talk about corporate profitability. We are awaiting some kind of more meat on the bone from Kamala Harris's campaign and an economic plan. She's expected to speak this Friday in Raleigh, North Carolina, maybe give some more details on that. But as you talk about corporate profitability, I can't help but think of the corporate tax rate and whether we are going to hear some plans from her to try to increase that rate if indeed she wins the White House.
I honestly, obviously have no idea what she's going to say. I have seen the same press reports you have. I'd be a little surprised if she gets into the specifics of the corporate tax rate. I think from the press reports, she's going to talk about the role that price gouging, shrinkflation, whatever you want to call it, plays in inflation. I'm not sure myself that it's a major factor in the inflation we had or what the inflation we have left. But obviously next year we are going to have the mother of all tax bills and tax fights, regardless of who's in what job and in what party controls the Congress. The TCJA is expiring. The corporate tax rate is actually not expiring, so that's not on the table, although it may get wrapped into the negotiations. But all the individual tax provisions are on the table, and it's going to be fascinating. But obviously, at this point, not knowing who's in charge of what, it would be foolish to try to guess at how that's going to come out.
Yes. Well, I'm sure we'll do a lot of it between now and then, Steve. So in terms of her economic policy, though, understanding that you don't know what she's going to say, what would you like her to say? And do you think this is just going to be sort of a repackaging of Biden economic policy, or do you think we're going to get something more novel here?
I'm not sure we're going to get anything that dramatic on Friday. I think she is a smart, experienced woman who's been in public service a long time, and will have, in due course, whether it's Friday or later, her own ideas as to how economic policy should be conducted. I think that, in retrospect, obviously, the Biden administration got an enormous amount accomplished, all the legislation. I won't rehash all of that for you. You know it as well as I do. But also, the spending did trigger some inflation, which is now happily mostly working its way out of the system. And so I don't think she's going to propose going back down that road. I think that the road that I would like to see her propose is that we need to do more for middle-class families and working class, and that can very well be part of the tax discussions for next year. We need to do something about housing. We are not building nearly enough housing. Housing starts are higher under the Biden administration than under the Trump administration, but not nearly what they need to be to ease the affordability crisis. And of course, getting the mortgage rate down, which will happen as the Fed eases, will help on that front. So I think those are the kinds of areas where I think she's going to need to focus. But again, there's only so much you can do in the White House, and we don't yet know who's going to be in charge of Congress.
Steve, I'm curious, just bringing up the other side of that as well. I mean, how do you sort of balance what the difference would be between a Trump win and a Harris win kind of overall for the economy?
Well, not surprisingly, perhaps, I find the prospect of a Trump win, just looking at it purely on economics, pretty scary. We're talking about someone who wants to extend and increase the level of the Trump tax cuts without any proposals that I've heard anyway for curbing in spending, which means big increases in the deficit, which means pressure upward on interest rates, which is obviously bad for homeowners, bad for consumers, bad for everybody. We've heard proposals for very, very large tariffs, 10% tariffs across every import and 60% plus tariffs on imports for China. That is a hugely regressive form of tax, like a sales tax. It's very much like a sales tax, and it hits working class people more than middle income people, but it also adds to inflation because it raises the prices, not just of the imported items, but of domestic items that are made, the same kind of items that are made here, allows companies to raise their prices because they're not as competitive with imports as they used to be. So there's nothing, frankly, that I've heard from the former president that would lead me to think that his economic policies would help inflation or help middle or working class families. And indeed, I've heard quite a bit to suggest that they would make them worse.
Stephen Ratner, always great to get some time with you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.